Welcome back to the Held Back podcast, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anthony Corby. I am the author of the forthcoming book, Held Back, and on today's episode, I'm going to be going over the characters and who they are in real life. So, with the Empty podcast, what I did was I devoted an entire episode to the cover, like I mentioned in episode one, and describing the things on the cover. But the cover for Held Back really isn't symbolic. There's not really any there aren't really any objects that symbolize anything the way there are in uh, in the in the cover of Empty. It's really just a subject in front of a school building because a book occurs in school. So instead of talking about the cover, I'm going to talk about the characters and then who they are in real life, who my inspiration for them were. Um, so just a bit of news on the book itself, an update on stuff. The book release date is still May 14th. Podcasts are still coming out every Friday at 8 p.m. through next Friday, May 7th. That will be the final podcast, and I'll read a little bit from the book in that podcast. And then if you're interested in more updates, follow me on Instagram at ACorbieBooks, ACORBI Books. So anyway, let's get into it. So the characters. We'll start with the main character, Julian. Julian is me. So there is something in the author's note that kind of ties in my own high school experience. I mean, I talk a lot in the author's note about me in high school, but I also give you a few examples. And you're going to have to read the book for that. But what I'm going to give you here is, or what I'm going to tell you here is that I went in to high school. Um, and initially I was optimistic and all that. Sometime like middle of my sophomore year, um, I kind of hit a rough patch, and I was getting like C's in biology and geometry, and I couldn't understand any of that, and so I was kind of struggling at that point. I was doing well in all my other classes. I was just not that good in those, and I was kind of pessimistic about that. And then I started hanging out with some people who were really anti-mainstream, didn't want to be associated with the mainstream crowd, were very much against them, like calling them normies and stuff like that. And so I kind of took in uh, that attitude. Um, and so Julian, from start to finish, with a little bit of variance in between, um, there's not too much that's um, you know this character is a lot. This character absolutely hates the mainstream. I didn't really care that much. My friend was really against people being loud in the hallways during lunch. I mean, he was like, he would go out of his way not to associate with anybody from the mainstream, while I was still kind of like, okay, well, you know what? I'm involved with the TV club. I'm still involved with things in school. Whatever you want to do. I mean, I'm just not as pessimistic. So Julian is kind of a mixture of me and then my friend. And then Julian's friend Will is pretty much entirely my friend in high school towards the beginning, and then is kind of a parody of my own worldview going into winter break last year. That's when he loses his mind. So I was pessimistic about how college had started off for me, and so I wrote Empty kind of like, not as a retaliatory thing against, like, I wasn't against like college itself. I was just against some of the people that I knew. I didn't really like them too much, and I didn't like how things were working out for me socially. Um, but this was kind of a parody of that, and I was doing a lot of research about certain, not last winter break, but before that, I was learning a little bit about uh, some of the insane groups of people that exist um, on the internet, And so I came up with an idea for Will that would have made his character something to laugh at and also something to cry at, because his character really does lose his mind, like really badly, and you're just gonna have to read the book to find out about that. But anyways, Tanner and Damian. Those are the names of two of the freshmen, and my inspiration for them was based on. So I had this class in my senior year of high school, world geography. My actual senior year, not the 5th year that I spent. I didn't spend the 5th year there. I spent 4 years there. Should make that clear. Uh, but in my senior year of high school, um, there was a class that I had, world geography. And I walk into class on the first day, and everybody in there, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 people, was a freshman. The class was full of freshmen. And so I dropped it, first of all, because it was an elective that, because it was an elective, so I didn't really have to take it anyway. And also, I didn't really care what was being taught in the class. I thought it was going to be more like what I had to do. Um, in middle school, I had to like map the United States. Even before middle school, when I was in 5th grade, I had to map the United States. And then in 6th grade, I had to map the world. And I thought it was just going to be basically about the countries. I didn't think it was going to be too much about topography or stuff like that. But I thought it was basically going to be kind of like a trivia class. And I was like, okay, well, this is kind of an easy A. I might as well take this. It wasn't. And also, I didn't like being in a class full of freshmen. I thought that was kind of weird. So I dropped it, and then I wound up just um, taking another class that period, which was um, my high school district's TV program. I was already in that. I already had that um, for my 7th class of the day, but world geography was my 5th class, and then I dropped that, and so I had time in the district TV office in the 5th and 7th periods of the day. But anyway, Tanner and Damian are basically some of the freshmen from that class. Just kind of, they're kind of a loose inspiration. Aaron. Aaron is a character who is rarely brought up in this book, but is still worth talking about a little bit. Aaron is me as a wide-eyed and awkward freshman. He is he and Julian work on a project together, a really short project, and then he also has a few lines later on in the story, and he's basically me as like just a shy, awkward freshman who didn't really know how to talk to people. Um, even though, yeah, didn't really know how to talk to people. Even though I still knew most of those people, most of the people that I went to high school with, at least in my grade at that point, because I just spent years in middle school with them. But I was still pretty awkward as a freshman. Victoria. There is a character named Victoria. There's really no inspiration for her, but she is a major part of the story later on. I never really had a clear picture of what she looked like or how she would act. Um, and she really doesn't have that much dialogue, but she's brought up a lot. And you'll see why as you read on. But there's really no set inspiration for her. And then Holly and Haley. Um, these are two people I was friends with early last year. Um, I kind of randomized their personality traits, and this was while I was in college. I kind of randomized their personality traits and then came up with these two characters as a result. Um, but yeah, I kind of basically just mixed things around, and these people were both in my dorm room or both in my dorm building. Um, so yeah, and then the the teacher of the class that he has to make up is Miss Grayson, and Miss Grayson is basically a mixture of my TV tech teacher in my freshman year of high school, and then my entrepreneurship teacher in my senior year of high school. So really nice and upfront, and caring, compassionate, that sort. So the teacher is basically kind of the foil for Julian in a sense. To kind of become more like her, become more caring and compassionate. But anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. So thank you so much for tuning in. That was only 10 minutes. Okay, well, I still thought this was only going to be like 7, but then I went more in depth with some of these things, but whatever. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, tuning in on Spotify, on YouTube, wherever you have been tuning into these podcasts, and I'll see you for the final episode where I'll be reading a bit of the book itself. Thank you. Have a good night.